Jibajitunda. All on day, the one that fits ya. Katikin the Jibajitunda. All on day, the one that fits.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Nile Book Club. My name's Katasi and
I am Kalungi Sebandeke, and today we are joined by
Chipo Kureya.
fantastic.
And today, this month, the name is a great name, so great that I got excited and ripped part of it off. But we are reading Nervous Conditions by Tsitsi Dangarembga, one of Zimbabwe's premier novelists. Oh man, I've been so excited to read some of our work, like from when I discovered or found out about her, obviously very late, for the morning body that she got nominated for the Booker Prize 2 years back. But yeah, so Nervous Conditions follows a young Zimbabwean girl in Rhodesia, a girl called Tambudzai, who finds herself privileged with the opportunity to go and study at a mission school with her uncle. And this comes as a result of, a tragic family incident, but also leads to a coming of age story unraveling and under or against the backdrop of the colonial Zimbabwe, or AKA Rhodesia at that time. So it's an incredible book. I think we'll just get started. Quickly, Katasi, I always come to you first. What did you think?
Well, firstly, big up my library for having a copy. Save myself $8.99. And I believe in it being a very important community asset. So my cover is a bit different to yours. Striking image. Is this what I imagine Tambu to look like? Maybe when she's a bit older. Can you see?
Yeah, I can. Yeah, that's really interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
She does look like how I would imagine she would look like. Actually. Yeah.
She does or she doesn't?
She does, because maybe in the village at first, she might not have that. She's a rough diamond, and part of the reason why they took her to the mission is because they saw that her potential. When they talk about I know it sounds terrible, but when they clean her up, and so, and I imagine, that's how she emerges,
right?
And probably explains a lot of the potential jealousy that the girls in the school have. She's clever, she's pretty, she's quiet and affable and everything. So yeah, sorry, I interrupted you.
No, that's fine. I mean, I think you're right. This is the end product, perhaps, and like now that I know there's a sequel, perhaps this is like the entry point to that. But anyway, I read this and I enjoyed it, and I found it a bit difficult to get into at first. It took me a bit, a while to warm into it. But I found Tambu to be really captivating, and I really enjoyed the world building that Tsitsi did. It was just so relatable. And for me, the most powerful thing is that this book was written over 20 years ago, and it's still so applicable, so many of the themes. And it just brought out some of my own questions around my identity as a diasporan Ugandan, or like this idea of this nervous condition as I don't want to say I'm a colonized subject, but we transcend different worlds when we go to Uganda and when we're here. So I completely identify with the general theme of this idea of these nervous conditions. And yeah, I really got into it towards the end, and I really savored the last chapter. And I'm so glad that there's a sequel to this, which wasn't actually in the works when she finished it. That came much after. However, had I been reading it at the time it came out in 1988, I might have been a little bit frustrated at how quick the ending was. But that's all for now.
Yeah, I
Okay,
mean,
I kind of no, go on, Chipo, go, sorry.
I was just gonna disclaimer and just say that I read this book 100,000 years ago, So I was really hoping to reread it for this club, but I I think I read it not close to the time when it came out because I would have been like a baby, but I think I was about 13 when I came across it the first time, and I just have memories of, you know, your family home when you're that age where you're young enough to sort of have no choices, but old enough to just feel frustrated and trapped and just be aware of your position in society. And I remember it having a huge impact on me just in that way, and just feeling those feelings. And it's just frustrating that I wasn't able to sort of like revisit it in that way. But from what you're saying about that diasporic experience, at that period of my time, I think those things were sort of like tingling up again. And at that period of my life, my parents had moved from London to Kent. So when you're the only person of the kind of globe majority in your class or school, you're forced to draw out who you are in ways that is not usually expected or needed of you when you're in a multicultural cosmopolitan city. Like you are the black one, so you better know who you are. And I think reading the book at that time really forced me to start asking those questions in a way that didn't need George Floyd to die in 2020. Do you know what I mean? Like in that kind of way.
Yeah, yeah. And for me, and like you, actually, both your points, especially in regards to displacement or replacement, so to speak. Um, First of all, Katasi, about warming to it towards the end. Like I felt the same way. Like granted, I dived straight into it. Like I was like, let me really invest in this because I felt like she was such a good narrator. Like she catches us with that first sentence. What would she say? I wasn't upset when my brother died or something like that. And it's
Yeah.
like, whoa, okay, interesting. Let's find out why. And that kind of like kept me going. And at first, I really didn't like her. I really didn't like her. Even though she was a great narrator, I really didn't like her. But I think towards the end, I really warmed to her, and she was such a balanced for someone obviously who's retelling the story. At least we're getting the impression that she's retelling the story of her childhood. She was very detailed, and she, you know, so many conversations she remembered, and so eloquent. And of course, her eloquence and intelligence is planted early on. Like you said, the world building is beautiful. It reminded me of actually Afterlives. So Chipo, we read, is it Abdurazak Gurna? Um, this in, incredible novel from a Zanzibari author, and it was a bit similar in that long chapters, first of all, but also just the importance of the girl child getting some sort of education and meet coming at odds with the men in her world. So I found it so kind of reminiscent of that as well. But I loved reading it. I loved like kind of just diving into that, hearing the kind of Zimbabwe specific, you know, Rhodesia or Zimbabwe things that didn't need explaining. And the introduction actually talks about that. They just talk about the sadza. If you don't know what sadza is, that's up to you. Eventually, you're gonna guess it's some sort of food, right? They talk about all these different things, and they don't have to explain it. And I think that's how all novels that are written about other places apart from England should be. Like, just put your stuff in there, and we'll try to guess or educate ourselves. And then to your point, Chipo, about moving from one place to the other. I was reading it and I was like, oh yeah, that was like me. I came from the village and then lived with my wealthy uncles and then came to England where I was like seeing white people for the first time. And I was like, oh, well, a lot of them for the first time. I was like, what the heck? And new versions of yourself emerge. So, and there is that nervous conditions that you talked about, Katasi, or that Fanon kind of, you know, coined, where we're always, you know, your identity is on trial so many times. And here in Uganda, you know, my identity is on trial. In the UK, my identity is on trial everywhere. So I really felt it for that. But yeah, I don't know if there's any kind of particular questions you had, Katasi, that you want us to tackle.
Well, actually, I just wanted to echo what you said about it, reminding you of afterlives, because there's a line in there where Tambu's father says, you know, you can't cook books, right? And
Yeah,
in Gerner's book, it's also
yeah,
said. So I thought to myself, wow, what a comparison. And I thought, are we reading books too similar in terms of like the genre and the time, or is this just a really important theme that's just reoccurring um, around like the importance of a girl child and patriarchy, essentially. And I also enjoy the fact that there was no glossary. And it's interesting when you go online and you look at like Goodreads and you see who's making the comments. Now I just kind of scroll through to find like the Black people, because often I find people are like, I couldn't identify with it. I missed some things. I don't understand what this person was saying. That's okay. She's not writing for the white gaze. And I think it's really radical to take that stance. And I remember Makumbi said the same thing in The First Woman. She writes for Ugandans and she's not there to interpret things in the same way that when we read English books, there's never like an interpretation, is there? But particular questions. Um, I guess I wondered what you thought about Nyasha. Have I said it right?
Nyasha.
yeah,
Nyasha,
yeah,
yeah. Mm.
yeah, sure. Ooh, I have an opinion about her. So Chipo, do you remember the character Nyasha? And what, like she's basically
She's
Tambu's
a cousin or
cousin.
something.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. She was very kind of considered to be stuck up and very, up herself. But my
But she
opinion
get
of
into quite a
her,
few arguments and
after
stuff.
she did, yeah, with it,
Okay.
especially with her dad. Yeah, there was so there's a big argument that she has with her dad, right? That ends up in literally her fighting with her dad and her dad beating her like terribly. And before then, it was kind of her condition, different kind of condition, was alluded to that she had some sort of eating disorder, some sort of image thing. Um, but before then, it wasn't really explicit. So for me, I didn't really sympathize with her, if I'm being honest. And maybe it's because I'm a dude, but I really didn't sympathize with her. And I kind of felt like, I'm not saying she should have been beaten the way she got beaten, but some level of discipline should have been administered, especially that in that time period. Because like even Tambu pointed out, and even like Nyasha points out later on, where she says, she tries to be obedient, she tries to, but she just can't. She just can't. I just felt like she was really being unnecessarily antagonistic to Baba Mukuru, because he was literally providing everything for her, everything, everything she wanted, she had it, but she was being unnecessarily antagonistic to him just because she could, and it was terrible to witness that, or to read what's going on with her or what she went through. But I just thought, I don't know, you kind of created the storm that
Mm.
you know made this happen. But again, that's maybe coming from a dude's perspective. Yeah,
I
that's my opinion.
have
I want.
there's a friend of mine. I keep saying friend, not a friend, a person that I know who sent me a really weird Twitter thread of nice guys being treated badly by girls and then the girls going off to be with bad guys. And it kind of ended up being a thread of nice guys or anyone who believed themselves to be a good guy just going off on girls who've gone and made alternative choices. And I'm not saying that what you're saying smells of that, but there is something about, and I recognize, maybe it's because I recognize it in myself, but you know those love languages where some people like to be cuddled, some people like time spent, some people like gifts, some people like acts of service, and the other one, I don't know, is it touch or something? Either way, if you're someone who wants to be able to do something for yourself and you're given everything, that can breed in itself resentment for those people who are doing their best to love you in the way that they can, and it's not speaking your language. And I feel like that's something that I've had to sort of navigate in my own life, because sometimes I'm receiving kindness, but it feels like mollycoddling or suffocating, because what I really want is action, or what I really want is time spent, or what I really want is something other than what that environment has conditioned for me to be in. And if you're told that to be a woman, you have to exist in these specific parameters, and you haven't really got the pushback, or you haven't got the boundaries set in place, or the boundaries are so strong that everything that comes out of your mouth only sounds like antagonism, what do you do? What do you do?
Yeah, I mean, I think I echo that in terms of the parameters that were being set for Nyasha Kalungi, because it sounds as if there's like some kind of victim blaming, in the sense that, you know, she provoked him and therefore she deserved to be beaten. But he wasn't attuned to his child. He was completely unattuned to his daughter. And there was no sympathy for the fact that she had been displaced. She came with all this Englishness, as I referred to it. So of course she was going to be more provocative. She was going to be a difficult, and then, you know, then being labeled as indecent, you know. So I don't think that the punishment even that was equal to what she had done. Yeah, and I think that actually beating is the lowest form of discipline, to be honest. I liked Nyasha, and I think it was really sad towards the end, where she'd been worn down so much, she started believing and listening to the patriarchy. And I think that was like a surrender, like I try really hard, but I just don't think it was genuinely her position, but I just think she'd been worn down.
I liked her politics, like when it came to, you know, the African kind of independence and liberation and so on and so forth. I just felt like maybe because of what Baba Mukuru represented in her eyes as, you know, the headmaster of this missionary school, as someone like you guys said um, who wants to upkeep the patriarchy, it felt like that kind of led her to be as difficult as she was, or difficult in quotations. But I just feel like there were other characters there that were represented, who went about it in a different way, but they got much better results from it. Like someone like Lucia, for example, is probably what Nyasha might grow up to be. Like she might, or what Nyasha wants to be. And I loved when she went in on the men and grabbed Take Shaw's ear, and, you know, went in on them during the conference. I loved that. But then when she came to ask Baba Mukuru for the job, and she appreciated that he puts in that work, and he was very selfless in a lot of the things he was doing. He was driving people back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, doing so many things. And there is something to be said about the kind of lack of appreciation that he got from so many people around him. So many people took advantage of this man. Like, granted, he was this image of, he almost represented the white man. You know, that's metaphorically, that's what the writers, I think, is alluding to. He was, you know, created to be this benevolent, you know, all-knowing, all-giving man. But some of them did take advantage. And Tambu was trying to show them, like, look at the greatness he's doing and all of this. And even she had a little moments of rebellion. But I felt for him. So maybe it might be coming from, again, me attaching myself to the male character. But yeah, I do understand. Like, I don't mean to victim blame when it comes to Nyasha getting, like, effectively abused. So yeah, she was a really, really, really good character, very well written character, but frustrating to read in certain places.
And we need frustrating people to make any kinds of difference. Like, we need people to question the systems that are in place, because without those disruptors, we'd still be in bondage in so many ways. Without, without the point at the end of the spear, you don't get penetration, you know? You, what's that? You don't lead from the crowd. You have to be the point. And if you're the point, you're the only one, and you're making that first step. So she got abused and she got worn down, but she etched a path for somebody else coming up behind her. And it means that now there may be people who are aware that this kind of thing is possible of a woman, possible of her or anybody else that might come after. It is.
Can I push against that a little bit?
Yeah,
Can I
go
push
on,
against that
please. I
just a
love
tiny
that.
bit? I just feel like Tambu's technique or tactic or strategy or way of doing it was a lot more effective than Nyasha's. Even though Nyasha is a disruptor and she was great with what she did, but I just feel like look what happened. It wore her down. It kind of affected her, and actually in the long run, it's unhelpful to whatever movement and cause she's fighting for, because now she's unable to. She's so feeble and weak and doesn't eat and whatever, unhealthy. She's driving herself crazy. Like, as someone who has been that level of disruptor before, I just feel like a mixture of Tambu and maybe a Nyasha and little bits of Lucia put in there is a
Mm.
much better effective way of going about whatever it is you're going about, especially in regards to the African liberation. Because Tambu, there was a beautiful sentence where she talked about her going to this new school with the nuns, right, was gonna help her mom no longer have to, live in the village, or a dad stop being so reverential to her uncle. It was gonna bring food, and she had a long-term plan. Now, I don't know what the Mournable Body, the sequel to it. I don't know what happens next, but I just feel like her strategy clearly is a lot more effective than don't know, the spear coming in with the sharpness can sometimes, you can end up being hurt with that very same weapon, I feel.
So I mean, I think there's space for different techniques, and I think that's what Tsitsi was trying to demonstrate, that I don't want to say like this feminine power, but I feel like for example, my guru, my she was educated, right? Wait, this is Baba
I think she
Makuli's
had
wife I'm
two
talking
degrees
about.
as well.
Yeah.
She was studying for a degree as well.
Right.
She
So
was.
she was educated, but it was interesting how she recognized that her husband's ego needed to be stroked. She'd play into this very soft character and almost pleading, but she'd get what she wanted. And I know aunties like that. Do you know aunties that sort of play that game? And I don't want to insult men, but it does work, and they get what they need. So I felt like she was presenting different ways that like these women were, I don't know, trying to liberate themselves in whatever situation it was. And I also don't take Nyasha's eating disorder as a weakness. I think that was her own personal protest and how she could control her situation, because it's her body, and that's what, when you think about eating disorders, it's about a lack of control around you. But that was almost her protest to her situation and authority. And it got her the attention that she wanted at the end.
I want to just pick up on what you said about the feminine power or what women can do, because so often it's called manipulation, like manipulation, like here we are as women, here we go again, manipulating men, when really what Nyasha was able to do, not able to do, but like to come out and just say it and be who you are is challenging her right to be authentic. And when someone has got to play those games and use tactics, then they are buying into a system. And if what we're doing is trying to show our authentic selves, how can we do that if we're constantly navigating, playing, because we're all oppressed by this patriarchal system? So yeah, I can appreciate the needs to do the other to achieve a reasonable and acceptable result. But what happens when you're just spending a whole life forced to be anything other than your authentic self?
I know we're spending a lot of time on Yash, but I question, what was that her authentic self? Because remember, before she went to England, Tambu remembers her a particular way. She remembers her a bit more, you know, what's the word? Like she was a lot warmer. She was more approachable. When they first went to the village, they were having fun. Okay, granted they were young kids, you know, they were skippy playing whatever patty cake. But was that authentic self? Was the fact that she got exposed to the Englishness, like Tambu's mum says, the Englishness is killing them. You know, that kind of made her think. That exposure to these Little Women books or Jane Austen and them kind of, you know, D.H. Lawrence books made her think, oh, there's another way to be. But who's to say that that way is the authentic way? Who's to say that that's the I'm contradicting my point earlier that I said about Tambu wanting to go off and live a better life. But what I'm saying is in regards to Nyasha's authentic self, was that really her authentic self? Or was she just living out a fantasy that she'd kind of built from the books she was reading? This idea of like, oh, there's more to this life. Sometimes maybe there isn't more to this life, and you have enough living in that big old mission house with chocolate cake and a maid and everything. And why are you trying to protest against that when there's other people like Tambu who died to be in that situation? You know, just a question. Um,
Maybe we should move on because it is challenging
I,
for sure.
yeah,
Like I am.
yeah,
I have to play devil's advocate because I know what it's like to have someone say, "Oh, we can't all be perfect," as if as if it could be a compliment any kind of way, or we can't have it as good as you, or someone say to me, "Oh, at least you've got this, at least you've got that," because I spoke about it to the prelude to this meeting, like, "Oh, at least you're on top, boy, that's amazing." I'm like, yeah, I got 10 seconds when I know that I'm Shakespeare quality, when I know that I'm Cleopatra Massive, when I know that I'm, Nina Seagull. I know the things I can and should be doing, but they want to throw me the bone and force me to be satisfied with what is beyond what I now know is well within my capability and well within my right to have. So if she's gone out into the world, there's no reason why she can't have a beautiful childhood, go out, be cold in England, learn, understand what racism is, and read Eckhart Tolle and all those people, come back and think, hold on a second, is that it, bruv? Like, what does she not have a right to grow, develop, change, and be? She has a right to be dissatisfied. That's the privilege of an intelligent person.
I think that's a really powerful point. That is a privilege of an intelligent person. And I think, like you said, Kalungi, Baba Mukuru, he basically represented the colonizers, essentially, because in the same way that they will, we've come to civilize you and we're doing this for you, and all the tenets that come with like the positive aspects of colonialism, but at a price, and at suppressing the indigenous people. But actually, I just wanted to talk about before we move away from Nyasha, I really liked their relationship. I thought it was a really positive depiction of girlhood, and that closeness that you can have with like cousins. I found it really warming, and seeing how at first it was a little bit icy, but then it evolved. And I thought the power switch was
yeah,
interesting because initially it was Tamba that looked up to Nyasha. However, towards the end, Nyasha then saw Tamba's sort of like her courage and what she'd done for herself, and almost started respecting her way more than she did in the beginning. I don't know what you thought about the relationship.
yeah. I really like their friendship, and I was kind of gutted when I was happy for her when she got the place to the Sacred Heart School, but I was slightly gutted because I was like, oh, that friendship, no matter how much they think they're gonna write to each other and they're gonna visit. I've been separated from my cousins that we were good friends. In fact, lived longer than they lived. They only stayed together for 2 years, and I was with my cousins for like 6 years. Right? I moved to England, and this is before WhatsApp. Right? So there is no message each other every now and then. Eventually, you become estranged, and the occasional letters or phone calls you made before on the wasn't even like a mobile. I don't know what we had back in the days. You know,
The
those
scratch
little phone
cards.
cards. Those kind of start decreasing. Do you know what I mean? They start decreasing. So yeah. So I was gutted, and it was such a great friendship, and they balanced each other out. And Tambo obviously acknowledged that just how great Nyasha's mind was, but also how much Nyasha was able to learn from Tambu as well. Like you noted, Katasi, like she was able to appreciate the fact that she could, you know, keep quiet and be observant and not necessarily because she had her moments of disobedience and rebellion by not going to the wedding and you know and standing up for herself. So she definitely was and starting to grow into a strong person, courtesy of Nyasha and so on. But I just the friendship was such a great friendship, really good friendship. Yeah.
Yeah, the kind of relationship that you get to your 30s and you think to yourself, oh man, that must have been nice. Sorry. Or that would be nice to have now, and we're out here lifing, you know?
I hear that. And in terms of the themes that still resonate with our present reality, right? And it kind of continues from Nyasha and Tamba's relationship towards the end where she's at Sacred Heart School and the nun can't work out, she can't differentiate between the two of them. Chipo, just to recap, in case you don't remember that detail. So basically, when Tamba gets into this like wonderful missionary school that she wanted to go to, that's really elite, and it's a very white school, and they only have like a certain percentage of African students that they let in. The nun or the sister, when she's welcoming her, she can't work out who Nyasha is and who Tamba is, and she keeps on getting confused, and she's asking Baba Mukuru, so which one is it that's coming? Which one is it that's coming? And it's just ironic because that's something that could just happen in London now, you know, when people can't tell Black folks apart. So I thought that was quite witty, and there was those are the elements of like sarcasm, and I thought that was really fun and made it more interesting. And Tsitsi's character definitely does come out through Tamba's narration.
Just to be clarify, is it pronounced Tamba or Tambu?
Sorry, I'm sorry. Tamba's a Ugandan woman I know. I'm really sorry.
No, that's okay.
Tamba
I
is a
just don't
word
want
as
people
well.
to destroy in the comments. Oh, Tamba. I just don't want the Zimbabweans to destroy in the
Please
comments.
don't come for
Listen
us.
to how she's pronouncing Tambu, you know, so please don't, I don't want them to murder you in the comments. But yeah, that was such a funny little detail that I know every African, just maybe every Black person in the world, every Black reader could recognize, just where they just, even though they just literally, they that lady had a part in Tambu getting a place in the school, or had already met her, but she was just like, so which one are you, which one is it? I think in one moment she says like, which one, who is it, but yeah, I felt for young Tambu. Like I thought she was going to that school. I saw the benefits. It was so funny. There's a moment, Chipo, where Baba Mukuru, Tambu's uncle, goes to her dad, and they're having a conversation about whether she should go. And because her dad is such a wet wipe, he's just basically like, he agrees with Baba Mukuru because he funds he's his sponsor in it. So he goes between literally Baba Mukuru saying, yeah, I don't think she should go. I don't think she should go. And then the dad going, yeah, she shouldn't go. She shouldn't go. Yes, but I think it would be good for her. Yes, yes, good for her, good for her. Yes, it would be. I just imagine that scene was so funny. Like this guy, man, just have a backbone, man. Just have an opinion about
But
something. Um,
this notion of a backbone is so challenging because of what colony really means. And
hmm,
like we weren't allowed a backbone, we weren't given that sort of space to be unusually brave or courageous to the point that our our men are like that, or even like this. If I bring it to what's going on now, we've got this sort of feminism, like, because I know gender is a major thing in that story, if I remember correctly, and like, and what that means now, and what the position and the role of men is now, which seeps into culture and even just our own identities. Like, what are men to do if they're not going to be our providers and like the strong ones, or jump to our defense in, you know, chests akimbo, beating, what happens exactly, slapgate. So
it's like- Ooh wee. Yeah, that's it. That will take over the whole thing. But we'll
I
get
tried
that
to
to the
avoid
end. I
it, but I
think we'll
was like,
keep it to the end. But no, yeah, it's hard to avoid. It's hard to. But yeah, you know what? I think money, obviously, even right now, money had a big deal or big um, place to play, or I don't know the word, but it had a really really big significant role to play in why Baba Mukuru was so respected. He was the big man who had the money, right? And just as his the metaphorical kind of representation that his character represents, the colonizers, the whites, they had access. The nuns had this 100-hectare piece of land that reminds me of actually the school where I work at, ironically enough, in Kent. And just they got fields upon fields. It's like a mini country. It's like a mini country. It's not Swaziland. What is it? It's a new name for Swaziland. Eswatini, I think. So it's literally a mini country, and I think because they have that, there is that kind of like feeling that you almost cower. Like thing is, Tambu's dad just cowered under the weight and authority that Baba Mukuru's money brought and gave him. But it was great to see my guru standing up for herself, because there's a section where she literally she's had enough. She's like, you never worry about whether I like it. I smile and I say nothing, so it makes you think I like it, but I don't like it. I don't like it. And she just went in. It's like, yes, that's great. And again, that's a representation of, I guess, the independence that was emerging, or that was going to go on to emerge after this book was written. So yeah, it was really incredible, all these kind of representations. But I wanted to ask, right? The book starts off with Tambu saying she wasn't upset when her brother Namo died, right? Did you not think that she was right not to be upset? Because, you know, Namo and Nyasha were like kind of two sides of the same coin to a certain extent, different and similar at the same time. But Katasi, what did you think? Was she right? Was he, did he warrant her lack of grief?
Yes, I think he was the whole mealies thing, with the mealies. Do you remember that scene, Chipo? Where
no.
wait, that is it Namo that does that, by the way, Kalunja? Am I getting it wrong? He
What
so
is
basically,
meaning? Remind me what the meaning is.
so the mealies are basically because she realizes Tamba realizes that she's not going to be able to get to school unless she gets a hustle on, and she starts growing her own
Oh
corn,
yeah, okay.
and then it suddenly starts disappearing. And it turns out that her brother's been stealing it and selling it and giving it away to girls, to seek their attention. And then they get into it. They get into a tussle, and it becomes violent. And then the Mr. Matimba, who I think might be the only ally, unless
Hmm.
you think Baba Makuru was an ally in this, you know, um, intervened.
Ally.
Sorry.
I thought he was an ally.
Yeah,
But but even
but
Matimba, man, he took advantage by when they went into town, and because he was a kid, to get the whole pity thing. Remember, the white people came up and gave them money, that he
money.
knew what he was doing.
But it's okay. He was showing her the ropes, I feel. So I felt her rage in that scene, around with the mealies, and he was a massive blockage to her success, or to her future. So I think it's where we come from, people. I don't know if it's the same as Zimbabwe, but women are paid to cry these days. You know how you have professional mourners,
Mm.
right? So when you juxtapose a professional mourner with a woman saying, I wasn't upset, but my brother died, I think that's really powerful and
Yeah.
Yeah,
reasonable for her not to feel anything about his passing, because she just had a very clear vision about what she wanted. And I don't think her and him and Nasha was the same, because Nasha wasn't oppressing her. If anything, she was in full support of her progression.
I think it's a really challenging, it's a great way to start a novel, and it's a strong challenge to what our perceptions are of what a family is and what is a family is supposed to be, and the way you're supposed to feel. And I think we 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 allow so much more pain than we are due or deserve in the name of blood and in the name of family. And it's such a courageous stance. I remember, and this is me being like proper vulnerable, like 2 years ago, I allowed the words to come out of my mouth that my sister is a bully. Like, so it meant I'd spent my whole life kind of defending her, falling on the sword, blah, 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 going back for more abuse or upset. Do you know what I mean? Like making excuses on her behalf. And it felt like I was disloyal or dirty or horrible what kind of a person would say that about their sister? And yet, what kind of a person would treat me in the way she treated me my whole life? A bully, which is the thing that I finally had the courage to say. And it's something that I think we need to see in writing more, because the Hollywood movies and the narratives and all these Jane Austen books or things that we see on Disney Channel for all the children, they really have you believing things a certain way. And it makes it all the more challenging when you are actually dealt with life.
yeah. Wow, that's the yeah. Thank you for the vulnerability. I can definitely relate on in regards to kind of like family politics and stuff like that. And but I actually not. But I feel like Namo was definitely a bully, considering as well he was much older than, or at least seemingly much older than Tambu. And I think it was just his arrogance that he had actually, I think even before he went, at least the way she describes him, he went to the mission. Because yeah, he was antagonizing her. He was kind of, flaunting his opportunities. Um, but as a sibling, though, I feel like she could have felt a little bit of grief, even if not just for her, but for her mother, who never really recovered from Namo dying, never really came back from that. And I feel like as well, Tambu had a little bit. There's a lot of fault with her as well, because even though she's, I said she's a great narrator, not going to your parents' wedding, that's that's not good, especially if you're able to, you know. Um, there was a lot of me that sometimes leaked out of Tambu. Granted, yes, she's writing from first person, but there was a lot of, how things were going to benefit her and so on and so forth. And sometimes I feel like she could have stepped into other people's shoes a little bit more than kind of being just an observer and judging people for for certain things that maybe she didn't understand, even like to this age when she's retelling the story, I feel like she could have just analyzed what was going on and the pressures that Namo probably was going through as well. Like he was going through pressures himself to fit in, like Chido was able to assimilate, right? Easily. Perhaps Namo struggled coming from the village. Maybe that's the thing that killed him. Like the Englishness killed him, their kind of inability to maybe fully assimilate, because there was a time when he came back and if he really wanted to go in on an argument, he was pretending he couldn't speak Shona anymore. But if he really wanted to go in, he'd switch it to the Shona and then he'd go back to the English because he was trying to assimilate, be like the white boys, the Rhodesians. But it didn't quite work out for him. So he had his own pressure. And I'm talking from the perspective of me being at drama school, being working at the school in Kent, and being in white spaces where it's like, oh, you're trying to be one of the lads, do you know what I mean? And it's just a bit hard to do that. And sometimes it can feel like you're being arrogant and being up yourself, but there's also pressures. This is just a funny Simpsons joke, but what about my womanly needs, Marge? Is what Homer says to Marge one day, when she says, you don't care about my woman, and he goes, what about, but I think what he's trying to say, what about my needs, Marge? And sometimes in our kind of fight against the patriarchy, we also forget the pressures that men go through. And I think you mentioned it, Chipo, a little bit. The pressures that the dudes were going through in that time as well. How terrible it must be to be ruled by the white minority, and you are this once strong black nation, black tribe, and then for potentially your women to see you and going, why don't you do something about this? Again, maybe that's the pressures of people, eye rolling and going, well, are you going to let him say that about me? Let me get up and show you that you can't. So there is that pressure that us men go through as well. And sometimes, unfortunately, it does manifest itself in very unhealthy ways that kind of lead to violence against our own gender, but also the other gender as well. So it's mad. It's a great book. So many conditions.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you bring up the men, Kalungi, because I just can't get over the scene when they're discussing Lucia's sort of illegitimate pregnancy, right? Because that scene went on for a very long time. And for me, that's just where all the power was amongst these men, which she referred to as the patriarchy, right? I think that's what Tambo refers to it as. So I don't know, I understand what you're saying about empathizing with the men and what they must be experiencing, but I felt like they had a choice, because when one of them suggested doing the cleanse, the spiritual cleanse or traditional cleanse, but Mukuru opted to stick with like modernity. So they had opportunities to check in with their more authentic and African selves, but again, it wasn't clear cut, because then they'd come back to Christianity and they'd come back to their traditions, which I guess just summarizes this idea of nervous conditions. And also I thought was interesting that the author chose not to, somewhat like Gurna, to focus on what was happening around them. We only got a few references to like colonial Rhodesia. It was really focused on everyday life on this village as it was on this Tanzanian or Zanzibarian coast. So I guess you've got to fit in a lot of dots yourself or understand the history. So I guess maybe I would have wanted a bit more of that, but maybe it's for me to just do my own research.
Yeah, but actually on that note, I feel that's a really good way to end it, actually. Yeah, but thank you, Chipo. It was really, really great to have your insight. And it was great. So the next book we're going to read is a Ugandan book, which is very controversial, actually got the writer in trouble, just as actually Tsitsi's been in trouble for some of her writing as well. So, but that's going to be like, it's a PDF because it's difficult to get hold of it because it's, it's very controversial. But
So
yeah,
just
so we're reading
send
that
that
next
over,
if you're
please.
interested.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll send that over. But yeah, thank you. Katasi, do you want to stay and just have a little debrief? I know, Chipo, you want it. Wait, let me stop recording. End of session.
Katigen did you but you tunda. All on day the one that fits ya. Katigen did you but you tunda. All on day the one that fits ya. Katigen did you but you tunda. All on day the one that fits ya. Katigen did you but you tunda. All on day the one that fits ya. The moon they are gone, say I know she can mash it up. She put it in reverse just to show she